Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 147. Now, before we get into the meat of the day, tiny updates. I started PT yesterday for this SI joint issue that got very unavoidable after a month in a wheelchair with my right leg extended. No one knows what it is. There's no diagnosis. Everyone's pretty mystified as to what do it do? But that's okay because my physical therapist is very curious and engaged and seems very invested in figuring this out with me, so I'll take it. So I'm continuing to live life in a very limited manner, but I can walk, and that is awesome. I can't tell you. I just love me a walk. I took one this morning. It's hot as the devil's butthole here. I don't care. Lovely walk in my snake-proof boots. In other news, Cycle 29 of the Audacity Project is going to be enrolling very soon, so the best place by far to be if you're interested is on the wait list. I'll put a link in the show notes. This is one of the 2 remaining cycles of the Audacity Project that I will run in its current incarnation. In other news, on Saturday night, I got to work with a new company called Charleston Entertainment, and I was introduced to them because of a fabulous performer that I used to work with in San Francisco named Ronnie Nothingmore. I'm not sure what Ronnie's performing these days, but in those days, Ronnie was a drag queen, and she was amazing. I will never forget her spin, jump to split, just chef's kiss. I got a message from Ronnie out of nowhere, and they were like, hey, you should know my friends who live in Charleston because Ronnie's originally from here. And they run an entertainment company. I'll introduce you. I'm like, damn, thanks. And we met, and they used me on Saturday night to read tarot at a corporate gig with 2 other tarot readers. So if you're thinking, wow, that seems like a pretty cool event that would have 3 tarot readers professionally, and you'd be right. It was absolutely beautiful. You know, sometimes corporate gigs, if you're reading tarot for them, it's kind of hit or miss because not everybody wants to be read for, or really, and it's kind of like reading for a closed steel door. This was not the case for this party. Everyone was very open and curious. And I just wanted to tell you that story because it's just another example of how it's not your level of skill necessarily. It's definitely not your level of skill alone that helps you grow and expand the boundaries of your world. It is the relationships that you make. Sometimes 7 or 8 years later, out of nowhere. Amazing. Thank you, Ronnie. Love you. I don't know how clear I've made it that I read tarot as a side venture, but it's something that I love to do. I've gotten pretty good at it. And if that's something that you're interested in booking, I'll go ahead and put a link to that offering in the show notes. All right, let's move on to the meat of today's episode, shall we? I put out a request yesterday on Instagram for episode topics, and this one really caught my attention from my friend Nicole. She said, can you do an episode about the seriousness of art and when it's not that deep? And for context, Nicole had been at a Q&A after a showing recently, and someone asked a question, and that question was, does anyone else see similarities to hair hanging and birth? And Nicole felt like the camera just zeroed in on her face, like The Office style. And a couple of people gave really nice answers, but she was sitting there hoping that her face didn't show. Like, no, I don't think there is. I do not see these similarities of which you speak. And ever since that moment, she's had this feeling that she can't shake, that a lot of art is very pretentious. Let's talk about it. So right out of the gate, I just want to make my feelings known that if you are making pretentious art, you go right ahead and do that. You might not think it's all, it's someone else's opinion. It's very subjective whether or not something is pretentious. So the most important thing that I want to get across here is do not be afraid to be pretentious, okay? Don't do it. Don't be afraid. Just you go right on ahead and do what you're doing. And the reason for that is, one, I don't think we should be pandering in any shape or form, including I don't want to be cringe. I don't want to be pretentious. Nope, just be cringe, be pretentious. We need these seasons in our creative practice. And you'll go through phases and you'll go through cycles, and you can't skip them just because you're afraid someone will call you pretentious or cringe. So you just let the muse be your guide, and you make what you want to be making, and don't worry about it. Okay, so now that I've said that, I will, because I saw immediately where Nicole was coming from. I remember being in a writing seminar when I was in college. It was a poetry seminar, and we would read a poem silently as a class, and then talk about it and deconstruct it and all that jazz. And I love poetry, and I loved listening to other people's first impressions, well, I think it's about this, and I think that there's this symbolism going on. I'm like, oh, cool, interesting. And then I was ready to move on. Let's read another poem. Let's keep this party going. But no, the class would continue to talk about the same poem for another 45 minutes. And I was absolutely sitting there what are you people babbling about? Can we get on with it? And all of this is, of course, very subjective to my own experience. I've never enjoyed academic discourse. I don't like deconstructing things beyond the level that I found it interesting. Okay, well, I think we've deconstructed it. Let's move on and do something else. And I know for a fact that some people love doing this, and they can do it for hours. I'm not one of them. So it's hard for me to appreciate, but I can appreciate that they are having an experience that is using their brains in ways that their brain works. And I'm happy for them. I just don't want to be a part of it. So here's where I think this gets sticky, right? We know about the ivory tower of academia and the certain language that one uses in academic circles and in higher education. Sometimes this language serves a great purpose, and sometimes the language seems to serve no purpose other than to make sure that only a select few can understand what the fuck you're saying. Let me give you a metaphor for this. When I was, again, at university, I knew a man who claimed that it was his purpose in life to connect to people and to connect people with each other. But the way that he spoke and used language was all this Jungian metaphysical word salad. I swear to God, even if you saw what he was saying written down and you could look at the words in black and white, they still didn't mean anything. No offense to Jung, I just was looking for a descriptor there. And when you hear them and they're all coming out in a string from his mouth, they sound really important, but he was just talking and making sounds, but the meaning was totally lost. And I watched so many people engaged in conversation. It wasn't a conversation, it was a monologue with this man, and I just see their eyes glaze over. And we were Southern, so we're taught to be very polite. Just sitting there waiting for him to run out of steam, I guess. And this is when it really started annoying me for the first time. this concept of like, you cannot honestly claim to me that your purpose is to connect to other people and to connect people with each other when you're using language in a word salad that is seemingly designed to be inaccessible. This is also my beef with artist statements. How did this happen? Like, how did this happen? That artist statements, which are designed to give context to a work or a collection of work, to deepen the audience's or the viewer's understanding of the piece and why the artist made it and what drove them to make it. And instead, most artist statements are the same esoteric, elitist language word salad that you can read the whole artist statement and be like, what the fuck was that? I don't have more understanding of this piece. I have less understanding of the world as a whole. And for that reason, I'm always going to be championing clarity over cleverness. It's actually not that hard to sound clever. It is more challenging to be clear. Now, that was mostly just me bitching about things that I find pretentious. And I don't think it's wrong to be pretentious, but I do think that we need to examine like our core driving, motivating factors in creating a piece of work. But much like that bag of hot air that was the guy that I knew in college, if you truly believe that your purpose and your driving factor is to connect with people and to make them feel something or understand something, then your language and your approach to your work does need to reflect that motivating force. Now, let's say you just want to make work that's like visually impactful, mysterious, and esoteric. Go forth and enjoy. Do it all the way. Lean way in. And feel free to use whatever word salad you want in your artist statement or whatever, because that supports your motivating factors. Now, none of this that I'm telling you is going to be helpful when you're kind of stuck in a discourse conversation. Well, I hope it's a conversation where you ran out of steam and interest 15 minutes ago and people are still going. And you just want to like scream, it's not that deep, y'all. It's not that deep. Now, it kind of is, but for context, yesterday on the Patreon, I put up Group Hoop, the full video. I'll link it in the show notes. Now, this is a 7-minute piece. It is unhinged in its ridiculousness. And what we wanted to do was take the piss out of pageant culture. And also, this whole piece was created in response to the hypersexualization of women from cradle to grave. And yeah, that is deep. It was objectively a very meaningful piece to all of us. The fact that it was ridiculous and irreverent did not lessen its meaning. It did make it hella fucking accessible. And this entire episode is just so colored by my own lens, particularly because subtlety is not a talent of mine, in my work anyway. So I think that it could be important to repeat a quote from Devon Price here, which is that if someone's actions don't make sense to you, it's because you're missing part of their context. Now, if, let's say, I find a piece of art to be pretentious and inaccessible, there's a very real chance that I just don't understand. I'm missing part of the context. And, in a perfect world, I would read the artist statement and be like, oh, okay, I see a little bit more where you're coming from. Probably not going to happen. And it's not even necessarily the case. Sometimes a piece of pretentious art is just a piece of pretentious art, and it was probably important for that artist to make. But I think the real treasure in this question and in talking about this is to be able to trust and to rely on your own tastes and not to measure the worth or the value of a piece to yourself by any other metric than, are you interested in it? And I remember being in seminar in college, being like, am I missing like some brain synapses here? Why am I not interested in this conversation anymore? I just want to move on. Now, as the creature that I am, I don't even care if I'm missing those synapses in my brain, because the fact remains, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Now, I trust my own tastes and I trust my own interests. And if I had been sitting in that room with Nicole during this conversation, I would have absolutely been cutting eyes at her and like we would have shared a moment. Like, are you over this? Yeah, me too. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value for everyone else in the room. It's just that would have been a moment for us to acknowledge and claim, like, no longer invested in this conversation. I also think that it is valuable to state the fact that just because a piece is irreverent and easily accessible, even ridiculous, doesn't mean that it doesn't have deep meaning. And just because a piece of work is difficult to grasp, uses high-handed language, etc., doesn't mean that it is more meaningful. Frankly, art is ice cream. There are so many flavors, and none of them are quote-unquote bad. If you like it, eat it, and if you don't like it, don't eat that ice cream. Vulgar things can be deeply meaningful. Lofty, award-winning pieces of art can be hollow. And it's when we get to share these opinions without apology and talk about, like, oh, you found that pretentious? Oh, that's so interesting. Why? Like, I'd love to have those conversations. What I would not love is to pretend that I'm enjoying something that I'm not. So to summarize, don't be afraid of being pretentious any more than you would be afraid of being cringe. Like, just do it. Go full wanker. Eat the flavors of ice cream that you like, and know that just because other people like something else doesn't mean it has less value, but what really matters is your own taste and your own interest, because that's how your work is going to develop and how your understanding and your skill is going to unfold, by leaning hard into the things that you do find interesting. And finally, just as one final reminder, if the driving force behind your work is connection and to have an impact on as many people as possible, please consider that in the method of delivery that you choose and the language that you use to talk about it. Looking at the time here, my friends, that's all from me today. Thank you so much, Nicole, for giving me something juicy to talk about. It was really fun. If you have requests for future topics for this podcast, you can find me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast, and indeed my own life, is powered by Patreon. So if it is of value to you and you have $1 a month to spare, I'd love to have you on there. And I just want to say extra special shout out to my patrons for making this and me possible. And also, no pressure. If you don't have $1 a month to spare, bless you. I don't want you harming yourself. There are people that do make this possible for me so that I can offer this as a gift. So, enjoy the flavor of ice cream that you like best. And don't go back to sleep.